just use your creativity. And that's how I like to create solos. Make it like you're telling a story of some sort, you know. And use a lot of different sound palettes. They're just fun. What can I say, you know? Any questions out there anybody would like to ask about anything?
Matt, I had a quick question about your sticks. You know, we've done this 3 years now, but we've never talked about what's your preferred stick and the weight and the thickness and why. Or do you switch it up during the night, or do you stay pretty consistent through it again?
I use the same stick every night. It's made by a company called Vader, and it's a typical 5B. And the 5B is a pretty standard stick. And it's my signature stick. It's got my name on it, and it's nude. It's the nude model because there's no varnish on it, and it's so they stay in your hands real. I use a couple kind of grips. There's the match grip, which is a normal way anybody would pick up a stick. And I use that with both hands, but I also use the traditional grip, which started a long time ago. I think I've explained this, and everybody kind of knows it, but back in the Civil War days, the marching drummers used to have a drum on a sling, and the drum was slanted like this, so you couldn't really play it like that. You had to play it like this. And that was adopted by jazz drummers at the start of the invention of the drum set, basically, in the early 1900s. And it's just a matter of feel. Some things feel better with a matched grip, and that's why I might change it around. For instance, anything Charlie Watts plays, you want to play a traditional grip, because that's how he does it. Get off my cloud, you know, that's Charlie's thing. And then there's the match grip. John Donna. Yeah. The one and only. Let's talk about him for a minute, because the guy just was the bomb. He was the bomb, and he's still referred to. How long has he been dead? He's been dead like 30 years, and he only lived to be 30 years old. I mean, his son Jason is a pretty good drummer too. in his 40s now, you know. So John Bonham just covered so much ground in the years that he was alive, and you can still reference his drumming. It never becomes dated or out of mode. He was just like a perfect example of bringing over a big band sensibility into rock and roll. And he definitely had a swing, and which, you know, he got from Joe Morello, Buddy Rich, Art Blakey, Elvin Jones, and he translated it into rock and roll. And that's what made it so interesting, and there really will never be anyone like him. Give it up for John Bonham. Yeah.
Can I say, some musicians, they say they swing really hard, and some musicians, I don't swing at all. Can you tell us, like, or show us, like, swing is kind of accenting a beat a little different or whatever?
Yeah,
Can you
well,
describe that?
People don't swing anymore. Young drummers don't necessarily swing anymore because everything's done to a click track. And you didn't have click tracks back then. There's nothing wrong with click tracks. And for anybody you who don't know, a click track is a metronome, and it keeps straight time. And you can get a metronome to swing a little bit, but it's just a feeling. Let me try to show you here. Back in the early days of rock and roll, let's do like a Chuck Berry song, like Maybelline. Oh, Maybelline. Oh, and that's got a swing feel for it. So the first version of Maybelline was done like that. The second one is the drummers got away from the swing thing, was, oh, Maybelline. So the difference between this is a swing, this is straight. And this swing thing, again, just went out of vogue once rock and roll kicked in. You know, they started, the swing stopped with the big band drummers. In fact, most rock and roll, the first rock and roll records were made by big band drummers. And then once the kids caught on, the kids started playing it, and they developed more of a straight four. But the excitement is somewhere in between the swing and the straight four. And that's kind of almost gone forever. And of course, the drummers growing up today, you really have to go back into history and kind of study it, you know. But does that answer your question a little bit? Mm-hmm.
Right. You swing some of the stuff you play with mule and stuff, aren't you?
I'm trying to swing all the time.
That's what I'm saying. It's a feel that you get that is in you. Some guys do it better than others. You know? How do you get that feel? You know?
It's just kind of ingrained in me, you know. And another great drummer is Ian Pace from Deep Purple, and he came from definitely he swings everything, you know, and in a heavy hard rock band, you know, and he's lefty, yeah, and but it's a beautiful way to play, and it all comes from a jazz background. Pass that mic around. Hey, Dino, how you doing?
I'm just wondering if you ever get your wrists ever get tired, or do you have any exercises or routines that you do to keep them flexible?
Good question. We're all getting older, and you got to stretch. You know, what gets tired? No, my wrists don't get tired. Sometimes if I'm dehydrated or a long plane flight, I get hand cramps, and I've literally had my thumb cramp into my hand like this, and I've had to pull it apart. So eat a lot of bananas, potassium, and drink a lot of water. But I go through a ritual usually every night. I can warm myself up in about 20 minutes. And it just really involves having the sticks in your hands and squeezing and releasing. And you can even air drum. Air drum is a great way to warm yourself up. Just do this for about 20 minutes, and you see what I mean, you know. And I go through rudiments and just take the drums and drumsticks and put them in between my fingers and stretch. You know, I notice when I go to the gym after I've played or after a tour, you stretch out and you can really feel you know, how everything is connected all the way from the fingertips to the shoulder to the back. So it's very important to just stretching, you know. But it's a ritual. I hate to go on stage without doing something going on cold because, you know, when your body's warm, that's when you can make love. You can't do it cold, you know. You don't want to be cold. It's a warm thing, you know. And it's the same way playing drums. I mean, making love to the drums. I mean, it's a very spiritual thing, you know. It's a very Zen type thing that I really respect, and I've always considered that way, and be disrespectful not to think of it that way. You know, it's very spiritual to me, and it involves warming yourself up and be prepared mentally and physically for anything that might come your way. You know, try to clear my head. Not have any preconceived notions to a certain extent, you know. But you know, I want to get to the point where I'm in what's called the zone, where I don't have to do anything. It's playing me. I'm not playing it, you know. And that's a beautiful place to be, you know. If you can get in that place for 2 hours, I mean, my day is complete, you know. It's really a big part of what I do. And it's a big part of what Governor Buell does, because when we do tap into that, I'm going to use an example, the Beacon, we did the Joe Cocker show, and we had one rehearsal, and we played the show. And so every New Year's Eve is, you know, we get into town, we go to SIR, we rehearse for 8 hours. And then on the 2 nights of the show, we go to the Beacon Theater at 2 o'clock and stay there, rehearse all day until it's a dark stage, and then we play the show. And there's a lot of notes and a lot of reading and everything, but once we got into the Joe Cocker part of the show, it just kind of ran itself. And I was telling Jorgen and later on, I said, you know, all we had to do is just kind of hold on and not fall off. And that's where you want to be mentally when you're having a satisfying musical experience. Cigarette afterwards, right?
Matt, you probably every great bass player planning about that. As a drummer, what do you like in a bass player, and what do you look for in a bass player?
Wow, that's a good question. First of all of these bass players that we played with after Alan Woody died, we did the Deep End project. And all these bass players are some of the most famous bass players in the world. And so I had grown up listening to John Entwistle, Jack Bruce, Rocco Prestia from Tower Power. So I was familiar with their styles, and so each session was trying to relate to somebody musically and personally that I've listened to all my life. So it's a little bit different than jamming with somebody you don't know. But that's why you always ask a player, well, what are your influences? And he says John Entwistle, you know, you kind of know what mode to go in with too. But it was very humbling playing with Jack Bruce. It was very humbling playing with John Entwistle. And actually that was the last recording session that he did before he passed away. And George Porter, just legends, you know, so it could be very intimidating. Fortunately, I didn't feel that way with any of these guys because they were so nice and just respectful human beings and musicians, you know. And that was pretty amazing. That after Alan died, you know, we put together the project, and all these people came forward, and it was all in an opportunity to kind of heal ourselves, and they knew that, you know, and that's why it went so smoothly. But what do I look for? I just look for a certain kind of groove of musicality. I also personally look for some kind of adventureness, you know, and I think Jurgen's got a lot of that adventure that, you know, I can compare him to all the bass players, but that's how he's really translated into the POA good, because we get along on that sense. He takes a lot of chances and risks, and I like that. But also being able to keep good time, of course, and playing the music with authenticity, and yeah, we played with about every good bass player there is, you know, and maybe every bad one too. But that's the gift that Alan Woody left us. You know, he's probably smiling up there, thinking, well, at least he played with everybody now. I miss him. Has anybody seen Savannah? She is growing up to be the most beautiful person. That's Alan Woody's daughter, and she's a handful, just like he is. She's beautiful. Savannah, I love you.
Matt, you mentioned a name when you were talking about John Bonham and his influence, Joe Morello. For some folks that might not go that far back, can you talk a little bit about Joe Morello, his impact on drummers, drumming, and you?
Joe Morello played on the classic 5/4, what's it called?
Take Five.
Take Five. Dave Brubeck. This is highly influential. Dave Brubeck and Joe Morello. The whole song was in 5/4, and he did a solo in 5/4. Yeah, and he had this incredible finger technique, and Joe just passed away not too long ago. And he lived out his life way into his 80s teaching the whole time. And I never studied with him, but I know a lot of people did. But Joe Morello was the guy.
Did you ever try Far More Drums? Did you ever get that down? That's a tough one.
No.
Off of Take Five?
No.
It's tough.
Yeah, I know. It's, but he was the king of the swing, and he could do it in an odd-time signature, and that was that was really hard to do. Yeah.
Matt, what kind of things do you do to keep your sound evolving as a drummer? To keep growing and changing?
That's a good idea. That's a good question. It's because you always want to keep moving forward. So I'm always working on stuff. And again, it's basically just to keep my body working. You know, if you lose it, use it or lose it. You know, that's the way it goes. But I have a ritual almost every night, even when I'm home, of it's usually after dinner. We'll puff. It gets you in the mood. That's a good thing, you know. But I just sit down and I see what comes out. I'd love to, again, just sit down and no preconceived notion, and just try to play something on the drums. And that's one of my favorite times of the day. You know, even if it's just for 5 minutes, or it goes on, it sometimes just flow out for an hour. And there's something I just, again, I look to channel anything like that, you know, and because I know it's in there, you know, and it's just a matter of bringing it out, and it's kind of what music is to me. Thank you for that question.
Do you ever wear earplugs?
Yeah, you guys tired of the jerk chicken? A lot of jerk chicken.
Matt, one of the questions in the back was, do you ever wear earplugs on stage?
Oh yeah, I usually do. Now they didn't tell you to wear earplugs 40 years ago, so. But there's much more concern about it now than there was then, and there's many different types of earplugs you can get. You get the squeegee ones, but I have some of the professional musicians' earplugs that, and they're kind of pricey, you know. It's kind of a catch-22, you know. Kids wear your earplugs, but at $150 to $200 a pop, and you lose them. I mean, you know, these. You know, but the squeegee ones you can use also, and they cost about $1.50. So, you know, but wear earplugs.
Matt, last night, compared to years past, it seems like your set, your drum set, your kit is shrinking rather than getting larger.
Well, thank you. It's a good observation. Hey, Allison, how you doing? I went to the Sabian office in Los Angeles, where I usually do that once a year, and I load up on cymbals. I love Sabian cymbals. It's who I endorse. I've been endorsing them for quite a while, and they always have all these new experimental cymbals for me to try out. And so I picked out about 15, and I out on the road with the POA, and they met me on the East Coast, all the cymbals, and I picked 2 out. The ride I'm using up there is a prototype. It's not necessarily a ride, but it's got a really unique sound to me. The one crash I'm using is actually my cymbal on file at the Sabian factory. It's a kind of a bastard version of one cymbal and another cymbal. They actually made it for me, and it's called Custom. But between those 2 cymbals, I realized that I can get all the sounds that I need. I don't need all these other cymbals up there. And I think it's very interesting. And it adds pair the whole kit down a little bit. I'm not using the extra floor tom. You know, you can get a lot of sounds in the same drum. A lot of drums might get flashy and all that, but I'm just kind of digging on a smaller kit. So right now I just have one ride cymbal, one crash cymbal, and then I ended up setting up the China type, which is the inverted cymbal.
That's the one that looks more flat to the left of your crash.
That is correct, yeah. And on top of that China cymbal is a little bell cymbal. It's actually in the key of A. Danny Lewis for me. And so I try to play it only, and then there we go, the handsome Chris over there. And there he is. And that's called a China cymbal. And put it on your head for a minute, because it kind of looks like a China. And there you go. Thank you, lovely Chris. What else you got over there? We can kind of show these cymbals. So, you know, I picked out the 2 cymbals out of the 15, and I never got past these 2 cymbals. This is a bell cymbal. It's in the key of A, and I put that on top of the China type, and it gives it a unique kind of sound. There you go. And so I can hit the China type, which is very distorted, and then get two different sounds out of one thing there.
And on the bottom of your hi-hat, some folks may not know, that's called a scallop bottom. And you haven't always used a scallop bottom, have you?
I've had these are called the groove hats. They're 15-inch. Hi-hats usually range from 15 inches to 13 inches, but I've seen guys, Steve Jordan uses 16, which is really cool. But the scallop edge actually lets the air flow out. Sometimes if you use a cymbal that's not scalloped, you can put your hi-hat and not get a sound out of it because the air is not being pushed out. So that's the whole thinking of it. And, that was a John Bonham thing, actually. He was one of the first guys to use the Paiste cymbals that were scalloped. You know, he had a lot of great ideas, or he was the first one to catch on to a lot of things. You know.
I read he used to put tin foil on the inside of his bass drum to get that metallic shaker sound when he hit the floor tom.
That's right, and it made it louder, basically. You know, and that was his thing. Yeah.
If you want the mic, put your hand up. Don't be shy.
Sure, let's ask a question first. Yeah, keep that.
How about your pedal techniques, bass drum pedals? Sometimes you use single wood doubles?
Well, for instance, I went on the POA tour. I didn't use a double bass. And I think one of the reasons I started using the double pedal is I wanted both my feet to be in the same working order, to be equal to each other. And that's a really good way to do it. But there's a lot of tricks you can do on one bass drum that you can do on two bass drums, and then you can actually do on one bass drum. But it's the same, the beat angles are the same as warming up on the hands. And basically, you do this for long enough, and you warmed up, you know, and just keep going from heel to toe, up and down. And then, I know you can't really hear, but maybe you can see. It's like a motion of like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's just like a swivel pivot. And keep doing that for 20 minutes and get really fast, and that kind of builds up the calf muscles. And so that's one way to do it. And then there's some guys who play just heel up the whole time. But there's a lot of things that can be done with the heel on the hi-hat, just like that. So do that all day, and you'll get it. And it's kind of the same way with the hand motion. Like I said. That's all technical stuff, you know. It's there's a lot of drummers who are technical, almost overly technical, you know, where it almost turns into a sport. And sports can be fun for a while, but it doesn't have that much to do with music, you know. And yeah, that's right. It's all fun. Thank you. So we got that ride cymbal, and again, this was a prototype. It's Sabian gave me, turn it around. It actually says prototype on it. It's Sabian under construction. So they just make these prototype cymbals, and they usually give them to their endorsees, and they check them out. If they like them, they might put them in full production, you know. Vault tour. Yeah, exactly. You'll put your finger on it. Now it's got a lot of different sounds to it. It's got a wash. It's a thin cymbal. It's got a lot of different sounds to it. So again, you talk about me paring down the kit. I've picked these two cymbals out where I'm feeling I can get so many sounds out of this over here. I really don't need 3 cymbals on this side for me to do that. I can kind of have this cymbal do everything. And that's kind of the mentality I'm trying to get into. And the same with the crash I have over there. It reminds me of an old cymbal, like a K, a Zildjian K, for anybody who's familiar with that stuff. Elvin Jones made those cymbals popular. But you can crash it, or you can ride it. And so I picked these two cymbals out, and I haven't even gotten around to using the other cymbals yet because I'm still exploring the potential of these cymbals here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely thin for a ride cymbal.
It's not really a ride cymbal, but I'm using it as a ride cymbal. And this is the crash, and this is the one that's on file under my name. This is like an HH Extreme, if you know what that is. Like it's a little heavier, It's very dark sounding. But, you know, with my sensibilities, I could almost use this as a ride also. You know, it covers a lot of ground. Sick, love it. So I went up to the factory a couple of years in Fredericton, Canada. We had a gig up there, and I actually went to the factory, and that's how I got that gong. We actually loaded up a rental car, and they allowed me to do this. And on the way out, I said, I need that gong, and we fitted it in the trunk. And that's how we got it. But they're great people up there.
Matt, I know some folks were talking yesterday out by the pool. I just happened over here, but not a lot of folks know about your early years. We know about you playing with Dickie and then getting into the mule in the 80s and 90s, but what were you doing in the 70s?
I was always playing music. I was on the East Coast. I graduated from high school in Virginia, and so I worked Virginia up to the Northeast, down to Florida, and basically the gig back then, if you were a working musician, was to get like a residency at a club for 2 weeks at a time, and they'd pay you. This was when you could do when you could do that. It doesn't really exist anymore. Club work, and it was very essential to do that. Back in even when you had a record deal back in the 70s, which I never had, but they would have a record company would have an A&R guy, and they would allow the artist to develop their sound over 3 or 4 records, and it was so many bands got good like that, and that's how you learned your craft. Those opportunities aren't available now at all. Today, if a young band gets a record deal, all this money is thrown into it, millions of dollars, and it doesn't sell, and they drop you, and that's it, you know? So, back in the 70s, I worked in all kinds of bands, just, you know, struggling to get by, to make a living, and not having a real job, you know? But it was a real job to me, you know? But you could actually make, you know, $300 a week and pay the rent and do what you know, fulfill your passion, you know.
Didn't you get down to Florida, and that's where you...
And that eventually got me down to Florida, and I was just working in a bar band, and Dickie Betts used to come in all the time and raise hell. And he was raising hell, I'm telling you. It was actually him and Don Miami Vice. Don Johnson. They used to hang out in Florida and come in, and they were both crazy nuts, and I was pretty crazy nuts too. And so, you know, he would come up on stage and jam, and we kind of started a rapport. And I actually moved back to Virginia, and they had a band called, the Allman Brothers weren't together at this point. It was he had a band called Betts, Hall, Lavelle, and Trucks, BHLT, sounds like a sandwich. And that was Chuck Lavelle, Dickie Betts, Jimmy Hall from Wet Willie, and Butch Trucks. And this was actually very early 80s. The Allman Brothers were not together; they were broke up, and at one point.